somehow that being thoughtful is the same as lacking confidence. For me, that's one of the biggest misunderstandings, that when we're thinking, clearly we don't have an answer, or we're on the fence somehow, or we're struggling, rather than acknowledging the fact that we are thinking about our answer. And therefore, when it comes to the way we lead by listening. And as you've just been talking about, Melitta, you got known for, being somebody who listened and was connected with people. And I think that's very much how we lead. So we are leader material. We're just not the right fellas out front, yeah, kind of leaders. We're the quiet leaders who listen and take people with us for the right reasons.
And welcome to the Art of Value Whispering podcast. I'm your host, Melitta Campbell, your business coach and value whisperer. And on this show, each week, I discuss value whispering, the smarter way to market your small business without being loud or pushy, that just happens to be brilliant for introverts. Each week, I share the simple, practical steps that grow your business in a way that aligns with your values, your vision, and your energy, so you can make the impact you care about without burning out or compromising on your integrity. Using my tools and insights together with your brilliance, you'll turn your unique value into clear words, calm marketing, and a meaningful sales process that you can deliver with confidence. And as you do, you'll naturally start to attract more of the right people and opportunities into your business and enjoy steady growth. Today's episode is a little bit different and a little bit special, or I think a lot special, if I'm honest. It's an introverted business roundtable, and I've invited 3 of my introverted podcast host colleagues to join me in this discussion. We have Joanna Rawbone from the Flourishing Introvert Talks. We have David Hall from the Quiet and Strong podcast, and Emma-Louise Parks from the Ambitious Introvert podcast. Together, we're exploring what it really takes for introverts to lead, market, and sell with confidence. And we're looking at how can you manage your energy and boundaries, the hidden strengths that introverts have that you might be overlooking, and what are the myths that can quietly hold us back. It's an insightful discussion, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. But a quick heads up before we dive in, you can now download the first chapter of my brand new book, Value Whispering, the smarter way to grow your small business that just happens to be brilliant for introverts. You may recognize that title from this very podcast, but that first chapter is now available as an exclusive preview just for you. You can go and download that at melittacampbell.com/chapter. So get your hands on that. You'll be amongst the first people to read that and start putting the ideas to work straight away in your business. Meantime, let's dive into our panel discussion. Hello, and thank you to all of you for saying yes to coming on this panel. You are all people that I have followed or known for some while. And what I would love to kick off with is just a quick round of introductions. And I think when people just hear the name of your podcast, they'll already get the theme of where we're going with this conversation today. So Emma-Louise, you have the Ambitious Introvert podcast. I love the idea that that could be seen as an oxymoron, but of course we know it isn't. And one thing that you talk about is this unwavering belief that you have in the power of quiet, and that the idea that introversion isn't a limitation, but when we really understand it and lean into that, we kind of honor it properly, it can be a really powerful source of renewed energy, deep focus, and amplified influence and impact, which of course, Value Whispering is all about that. So I really love that. David, you have the Quiet and Strong podcast, and talking about introversion is a natural way of being. Of course it is. It's not a flaw to correct. We were talking just before we came on, it's like, oh, you'll get over it. It's not a flaw to correct, but it's really a valid and powerful way of engaging and showing up in the world as well. So I really love that focus. And Joanna, we actually started our podcast at the same time, and that's how we met originally, was through kind of the whole process of getting them up and running. So I love that I've been following your journey from the beginning with the Flourishing Introvert. Again, such a powerful name that really talks about the focus of your show, which is just wonderful. And I'm always listening to your advice. Oh, I didn't know that before. So it's really great. And you had a quote, and it's like, when I flourish, I don't blame others, but you take responsibility for your own actions, your own behavior, and your own way of being. And I think often introverts can lean into it as an excuse for not doing things. So I love that you're using it as an excuse to like, well, no, we can actually do some really incredible things. And flourishing is all about saying, I'm an introvert and therefore I prefer to do things this way to be my best. But it's not a limitation, as Emma-Louise was saying, it's really a power when we can embrace it the right way. And of course, my show, The Art of Value Whispering, that you're all listening to right now, is all about how you don't have to be loud to make a difference. But when you embrace your skills as an introvert and appreciate your true value, you can start to naturally stand out, make a difference, and resonate with the right people. It's not about being pushy or louder, just resonating deeper by being yourself. So I think we're going to have a brilliant conversation today. So as I said, thank you all so much for being on the show. But let's dive in with some questions. And I have a big juicy one to start off with. And I'm going to start with you, Jo. I would love to reframe this introversion. And what do you see as some of the key strengths that introverts bring into the world of business and leadership that you feel sometimes go perhaps unrecognized or undervalued, and often unrecognized or undervalued by ourselves? It's not just by others as well.
This is such a good question to start with, because obviously it plays directly into your concept of value whispering and knowing your true value. And as I'm talking about these strengths, I'm also aware that any of us can overdo the strengths, in which case then they become a bit of a weakness as well. I think it really does depend on our introvert type, because, no two introverts are the same. I think there are some universal ones, which I'm happy to start with. Like, we think before we speak. We tend to have that think, say, think communication process. And what I found is that saves a lot of unnecessary conflict and minimizes misunderstandings. And I think resourceful is one, but the downside when we overdo that is we can find it difficult to ask for help. Calm is often one that people will say, if you look at the panel of the four of us, we all seem quite calm and composed. But what you don't see is kind of how the legs are going like Billy-O under the table. And I think the most important thing is whatever our individual strengths are, is that we find a way to own them and articulate them positively. And that, for me, really plays into that value whispering piece.
Yeah. And I think, as you said, and we're going to come to this in a moment, that there is no one standard introvert thing. We all have different strengths. And it's the same with extroverts as well. They have different strengths, and there's no one version of an extrovert either. So I think for all of us, it's great to lean into these. But I love that you raised that point there that we can overdo it. Like a big problem for us is, when you have those moments of doubt or imposter syndrome. We had Claire Yosa on the show talking about this, that then you get stuck in overthinking. And whereas extroverts have the same problem, but they have a bias for action. So they naturally kind of get out of it, whereas we can kind of get stuck in this whirlpool of overthinking. Yeah. So it's understanding those strengths and leaning into those, but not too much knowing that limit, which is, such a great message. Thank you. And David, how about for you?
So I think, we definitely are not all the same as we're talking about, but what I think we share in common is my definition of introversion is that we turn inward more often than not, that we are deep thinkers. I think we all share that, and that we all can be very reflective and observers. There's a lot of other things, but I think that the fact that we turn inward, we're deep thinkers, and that leads to some great ideas sometimes. I think that is a strength that we all share, is that part of it. And I think that's what makes us introverts. It is that turning inward more often than not.
Yeah, and you often hear it, and I think this is a really nice thing that we hear about introverts. Like, oh, you often hear someone, oh, she doesn't say much, but when she does, you need to listen because it's been very well considered and taken all the points and come up with something worthwhile to share. So I used to hear it not just about myself, but about others as well when I worked in an office and was having meetings with different people. And I was like, actually, that's really nice that people had recognized, oh, you need to lean in and listen at this moment, which is great. But yeah, it's that time to think is really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're always thinking, so we have a lot to say. We just need to make the space to do that. And I think I remember you saying on my podcast that someone would turn to you at the end of a meeting and say, "Hey, Melitta, what do you think about this?" Because you had built that reputation of having those ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Within a frame. So I think that was one of my proudest moments in the company. And it was just before I left on pregnancy leave and never went back, never went back. Um, was that I'd built this reputation bit for being reflective, but also coming up with these ideas and in a particular space, as I said. So it was really nice when they said, "Well, you always have a good idea on this. What's your take?" I was like, "Yes, I've been recognized." And then it was like, "All right, bye." Yeah, thank you. Emma-Louise.
Big ticks next to all of the ones that Joanna and David already said. The thing that for me stands out in all of the clients that I work with is emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
And that might not be a very typical quote unquote introvert trait, but I've seen it so much where they have the ability to feel the energy in the room. They can empathize with people. There's a lot of nuance in so much within, communication, like Joanna said, or with any stressful situation or any big challenge that people are going through. I think what we do really well is it's not black and white. It's not right or wrong. That deep processing, which can tend into overthinking, of course, helps us so much because we look for the nuance and we look for the gray areas and we consider those things. And I know that for myself and my clients, feedback they get a lot is, "Oh, I felt so comfortable with you," or "I felt safe with you," or this felt like a very safe space or a nurturing conversation. And I think emotional intelligence is something we're going to see, well, we're already starting to see more companies looking for now with AI automations. They're looking for the skills that run alongside that. And to me, I just think introverts just embody that naturally.
Yeah, totally. And recently there's been a lot of talk that I've been aware of, conferences I've been to, networking conversations I've had, and all about the importance of building real relationships. And one thing that helped me build my network really quickly, or become known for my network, I should say, is that if people ask me, "Do you know anyone that does this?" I always knew someone or someone that could connect them. I'm like, "Gosh, you know all these people." And it's like, I don't really. I just listen when they tell me what they do. I listen, I'm interested, and therefore I can like introduce people to other people. And I think this is part of it as well, that you're listening, you're absorbing who are these people and what is important to them and who do they need to be connected to and what ideas are going to work with which person. And I think, as you say, that nuance is so powerful in so many different ways and contexts as well. So I think that's something that we don't always necessarily appreciate for ourselves as well. So thanks for raising that. So is there a common myth or perception that you've come across time and time again and you just like, "Oh, not this again," that you would really like to say once and for all, "This isn't true"? Joe, you had a big nod there. Let's start with you.
I think for me, one of the biggest things, because I still work a lot with corporates in the leadership space as well as with individual clients, and is the perception that introverts don't make good leaders, that we're not leadership material, as it's often described, and somehow that being thoughtful is the same as lacking confidence. So I mentioned a little while ago about my think, say, think process. And I remember being a delegate on a course when I was already a trainer, and the person knew I was already a trainer. They asked me a question and I did my let me think about it before I say what my answer is. And they moved off and asked somebody else, never came back to me. And at the end, they gave me this feedback that I was a low responder who lacked confidence. And for me, that's one of the biggest misunderstandings, that when we're thinking, clearly we don't have an answer or we're on the fence somehow or we're struggling, rather than acknowledging the fact that we are thinking about our answer. And therefore, when it comes to the way we lead by listening. And as you've just been talking about, Melitta, you got known for being somebody who listened and was connected with people. And I think that's very much how we lead. So we are leader material. We're just not the right, fellas, out front, yeah, kind of leaders. We're the quiet leaders who listen and take people with us for the right reasons.
Yeah, and I think this is where I'm going to come to you next, Emma-Louise, because I think the emotional intelligence that you were just talking about plays into this so well. So that's what we've mentioned as a strength, but is there a myth or a misconception behind that that you see?
Yeah, I think that we can be seen as too sensitive, overly emotional, all of these things. And of course, like Joanna said, our strength can become our weakness. It's very much the poisons in the dosage. But where we do have that incredible ability to read people and to understand the subtext of what's going on without it being explicitly said, we can also go too far, get a little bit in our heads, take on other people's emotions, overly worry about other people and what their reaction may be. So, yeah, as with anything and as with anyone, extroverts as well, it's walking that line and finding that balance of how much of that do you bring into your leadership, because that creates psychological safety. Like Joanna says, that helps you bring people along with you. That creates team cohesion. It creates a safe space and all of that. But without you being the leader that is like, I have to mop up everyone's mess and I have to take care of everyone. And I'm, kind of like melting into all of this responsibility. So, yeah, I mean, I think that so many of our greatest strengths can also tip the other way. And that is the whole point of understanding ourselves and understanding our introversion so we can find the right balance.
Yeah, I think balance is a key thing here as well, because as you were saying that, I was remembering that when I worked in corporate, I was responsible for internal communication and I coached the top 60 leaders in the bank where I was working on communication skills. And what I found was most of them were terrified about talking to their team, even because they just didn't know how to go about it. Most of those were also introverts, but nobody's ever taught these skills. So they just kept their door closed. They may be really good at listening, but without really reflecting and bringing the team into the conversation, they also had a bit of distrust as well. So I said there's that strength, but we need to also kind of upskill in different ways to make sure that we can still maintain the communication to bring the people along, as Joe was saying as well. So, David, Emma-Louise was talking about emotions and sensitivity and emotion being a man in business. Have you come across the same things, or is this a female experience?
So it just depends. We are all different. And, definitely when I speak, I'm not speaking for all men because some men are going to be more like what Emma-Louise described,
Mhm.
but I am more analytical. So if you know the Myers-Briggs, I'm an INTJ, and it means that I approach things more logically. And it's not good or bad. All these things that we're talking about today are not good or bad. It's just the way it is. But we need to understand and have that emotional intelligence that we have different ways of approaching things. So, for example, Emma-Louise might have this awesome gift of being able to feel my feelings. Maybe she is right now, but um, I don't have that, and I don't know why. But I deeply care about people. Otherwise, I wouldn't do the work I'm doing. But it's a logical approach, and I'm using my imagination to put myself in people's shoes. I'm using my imagination for my empathy. And so it just can look a little differently. And, there's definitely men and women that are INTJs, and there's men and women that are INFJs. There can be something in there that, there's definitely factors between men and women, but so that's just something to keep in mind, is that we have different gifts when it comes to how we care about things and how we express things.
Yeah. So do you feel that's the myth that you want to kind of knock on the head, that it's different for everybody?
There's a lot of myths out there. I was just thinking I did an episode on the top 10, and then I had to do the next 10 in a different episode. Something that I come across all the time right now, maybe I'm talking to somebody about being on the show, and I get this so much. It's like, well, I really need my time alone, but I can't be an introvert because I like people. And to which my response is, yeah, I like people too. I am definitely an introvert. I like and need people. And it's so crazy. And I personally don't use the word ambivert. I don't think that anybody's dead in the middle. I think that we lean one way or another. I don't call things extroverted. I'm doing this podcast and I love it. I'm not nervous, but I knew that I needed to prepare ahead of time. But the myth is that we all like people. Very, very, very small percentage of the population don't like people. It's like maybe 1%. We like people. We just might need people in different doses. We might want people in different settings. We're often better at the one-on-one, or small groups. But we love our family and friends. We enjoy collaborating with people in working environments. It's just, we may not, just as one example I use often, we may not like the traditional networking event where we're bouncing from person to person as quickly as we can, and it might not be that effective. So one of the biggies for me is that, of course, we like people. We need people. We need some time alone, and it's not just for recharge. We need to recharge, but we need to use our gifts. We need time to think, time to be strategic, time to plan, and we can be really good at focusing. So we need some time for that. But we also, of course, we like people.
Yeah, I remember listening to a particularly well-known expert recently, and she was talking about how there's new research to show that the more people you're connected to, then the longer life you'll have. That's really a key for longevity. And then she added in, sorry, introverts. And I was like, but we like people. And this is a particular person who's an expert in people. And it's like, I couldn't believe she said it. She might have regretted it afterwards and realized, oh, that slipped out when I don't really mean it. 'Cause having followed her for a while, I never got the sense that that was the way she thought. But yeah, I was like, no, we do like people. But we just have to manage our energy around that. And as you say, find the way of connecting with people that feels most relevant and comfortable for us as well. Not to, I mean, it's always good to push your comfort zone a little bit, but if you're always just feeling really negative about it, and I had a conversation with Fifi Mason before about sometimes we've pushed ourselves too far out of our comfort zone or too far out of our kind of social energy and didn't feel good, and that has become a memory. So that can make it feel more awkward the next time. But if we understand, lean into what works for us, as Emma-Louise we were talking about Emma-Louise saying at the beginning, then when we embrace our own energy and work in accordance to how we like to show up, then there's nothing we can't do. And I remember when I was training, I used to train communication professionals as part of this wider organization. And one of the trainers once at the end said, do you know what? Introverts have no place on stage. Look at that person. He's not entertaining. He's not out there. He's just listening and like engaging with people. I was just like, surely that's exactly what it takes. But funny enough, she was the only trainer not to be invited back for the next round. Her scores were really bad because, she, as an extrovert, she thought training was all about like her being the star of the show rather than the other trainers who were more introverted, who were a bit more like, well, let's see where I can take the audience today and what do they need from me. Coming back to that EI, bringing that in was much more powerful. So yeah, that was kind of, I was laughing behind the scenes. So we have already alluded to the fact that we're all introverted, but in quite different ways. So let's just showcase that a little bit. Joanna, I know you've been talking about how you're quite an outgoing introvert, the complete opposite of myself. What does that look like for you?
The conversations so far have been so interesting, and I'm loving the fact that throughout it have been demonstrating our different strengths and our different ways of being as introverts. I'm what's classed as an open introvert because there are many different types of introverts. I have a quiz where I kind of take Myers-Briggs to the next step in a way. And what being an open introvert means is that if you ask me how I'm feeling, I will tell you. If you ask me to talk through my thoughts, I'm likely to be able to do that. So one of my big frustrations is when people say, how are you today? And I kind of go, well, actually, I've noticed that, my thinking's a bit fuzzy today. And it's like, I didn't want to know. I just wanted a, yeah, I'm all right, thank you. Because, the routine we get into of asking people how they are and not meaning it. So I think it's really important for me to recognize that I'm more of an extroverted introvert. And so I'm absolutely an introvert. When my batteries drain, I'm away to recharge. But I can access some of those extroverted traits that have people say to me, you're not an introvert. I've heard you talking on stage, or I've heard the way you engage with people. So I think for me, that's my type of introversion. I'm not shy. I've been known to talk to random strangers in a queue and laugh and joke with people. But where you may see me looking shy is when I get into a large group of people where I just feel immediately overwhelmed. But that's not shyness. For me, that's overwhelm. But yeah, that's my type of introversion.
Yeah, and I quite liked in the book Quiet, and she talks about how novelty can be draining. And I think these large crowds, it is really hard to get familiar with a large crowd very quickly. So it's just, as you say, that overwhelm. Yeah, so that's really interesting. And didn't you just take a month out? Was that part of this recharge?
Yeah, I took some time out because I had a big realization actually that for me, there is a big difference between rest, recharge, and replenishment. And my aha moment was that no amount of rest will compensate for insufficient replenishment. And recharge is obviously just getting that, the charge back in my batteries. Resting is just taking a moment and kind of preventing battery drainage, if you like. Recharging is literally kind of topping myself back up. But replenishment is something much deeper at a kind of soul level. And I had to take time out because I hadn't taken enough replenishment time.
Ooh, I love that. Great. So David, how does that show up for you, this idea of being an introvert?
So, like many people on my show, I felt like something was wrong with me. Why couldn't I be more like this person or that person? Why can't I be more comfortable in speaking? And it was a long journey for me to figure this all out. But what I figured out was, and I like how Joanna says it, think, say, think. I didn't understand that. And when you don't, you could be made to feel shy. If you don't realize that my natural process is I'm going to think first, put all my ideas together, and then share what I think is most important, you can feel shy and you can lack confidence. And that's when one of my big epiphanies, I got certified to give the Myers-Briggs, and the facilitator said, introverts think and then speak, and extroverts speak in order to think. And I'm like, oh, okay. And sometimes we talk about like, I'm going to think and share my best thoughts. Extroverts are going to think out loud to develop their thoughts. I'm rarely going to share a half-baked idea, but for extroverts, it's normal and it's how they operate. And so, again, just understanding that I think first is a gift. It's a strength. I come up with some great ideas. I'm very analytical. And also, I love speaking. I love being on podcasts like this. And part of it was telling myself, you have all these great strengths. You have a lot to say. You're not perfect, but guess what? Nobody listening is perfect. And so those things gave me all the confidence in the world. And one thing that I didn't quite understand is I'm very confident. I'm not shy, but I'm never going to have as many words as my extroverted friend because they're thinking out loud. And even though I understand my introversion, it doesn't switch. I'm not thinking out loud most of the time. And, I talk like this most of the time, generally. I think that's very important that, there's not always one way that we're doing anything, but generally I'm going to think first. And it's what makes us brilliant. And we come up with some great ideas, some ideas that introverts have changed the world, and it's just really important to understand that. And I think that's one way if someone's lacking confidence or is shy, understanding their introversion and their gifts can really help them overcome that.
Yeah, gosh, I had some aha moments there. And this idea of like, certain people or situations can make you feel shy. And I think looking back, I grew up a shy child and I wasn't always shy in every situation. And I think that's the thing as well. It's not every situation makes you feel shy. There are cases where you can be extremely extrovert, and the people are like, well, you're not an introvert because you're not shy. But I never thought of it being like the way a person is being or the situation that's making me feel shy. It's not necessarily coming from within me, it's just an environment that isn't suited to my skills and strengths. So thank you.
Yeah, when you are thinking and you get the dreaded, why are you so quiet? Where do you go from there? It's like, no, no, I'm not. So, yeah, it's important to understand that, I'm going to think and then I'm going to speak. And, you know, like we talked about earlier, you can build that reputation and people can understand that we do have a lot to say. It's just, you know, we're going to think first.
I don't know about you, but when I'm thinking, I don't have an expression on my face. So people think they really upset me. I was like, no, this is my thinking face. So now I introduce myself. By the way, if you say something really interesting that I want to think about, I don't smile. Just so you know, you haven't upset me. It's something really good that you've done. So anyway, that's my myth that I'd like to bust.
Yeah, our expressions don't always match what's going on in our heads. That can be an introvert struggle for sure.
Yeah, and my mouth naturally turns down anyway, so I have to work really, really hard to kind of express that. Emma-Louise, how about for you? What's your kind of introversion? I think you've given us some hints already, but
I am definitely the atypical introvert if you take the traits that people would say. So I'm not shy, I'm not socially awkward, I'm confident, I love public speaking, I love people, I'm very ambitious, hence the brand, action taking. So people go, "Are you sure you're an introvert?" And oh yeah, I'm absolutely sure because I know that I need to remove myself from the world when it is time to recharge. And an interesting thing for me is I actually enjoy groups. I actually do like being in group situations, which many introverts don't. I do prefer one-on-one and that depth, but I'm very happy in a group. My issue comes not from social anxiety or not from overwhelm, like Joanna said, but I get overstimulated by the environment. So I'm a highly sensitive introvert, and that is often where my battery drains. So if there's multiple conversations going on, or I'm having a conversation and there's music in the background, or there's music in the background and the temperature's just a little bit too hot, all of these layers kind of build and build and build. And I get to a point where I'm overstimulated, and quite often that is where I have to take myself away and recharge rather than being peopled out. So definitely see myself as an open introvert, the way Joanna described it. Absolutely. Maybe a little bit breaking the mold introvert. I don't like to prepare for things. I like to do it on the fly, but I was an air traffic controller, so there's probably part of that there. But yeah, absolutely 1000%. Am I an introvert, and do I need to be in my own energy to recharge? And do I prefer turning inwards than turning outwards for big decisions? Absolutely.
yeah, and I feel the same. I love being in groups, but it depends on the group. If there are, as you were saying, David, a lot of extroverts speak to think, and then that's so much information to process. If you want to take the ideas and think and then come up with something, and then the conversation's moved on to a whole nother subject, and you're like, hold on a minute, we've missed this really good thing because I finally had that chance to catch up. Yeah, groups like that are overwhelming, but if it's well managed, then yeah, groups can be really fun. And Joanna, you mentioned your quiz. Where do we find that? Because it sounds fascinating. I think we're all going to be going on afterwards and finding, oh, I'm a this introvert.
It's your introvert type, all one word, .co.uk, and you may come out as a classic, which is almost the stereotypical introvert, or one of the 5 extroverted introvert types, or what really blows people's mind is a blend. So I was thinking about Emma-Louise and thinking that she's probably going to be, yes, absolutely an open introvert, probably a dynamic introvert, and I'm reckoning an engaging introvert and probably a sociable introvert. So when you get that mix, people are definitely going to say, you're not an introvert, because what they don't see is when the battery goes and you clear off. So, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. And once you understand that blend, it's going to be much easier to manage and create those right fit situations and connections and things too. So yeah, thanks. So this show is all for business owners and how they can achieve more impact and influence and feel proud of the work that they're doing without necessarily having to be loud. How can we together build on what we've already shared and help them come away with a helpful toolkit? Let's keep the same order. So, Joe, is there anything that you have found particularly helpful as a business owner? For example, you recently now have a team behind you. Has that been a game changer? Because I know it was a very long time in coming. Is that something you think actually that could have helped earlier, or this idea of taking breaks? What's in your toolkit that helps you flourish?
Certainly now I would say the team, and I often talk to them about how they hold me together. So they are an extraordinary team, and I'm very fortunate to be working with them. And I think the biggest thing for me was boundaries, and knowing that I deserved to have boundaries that I could put in place, that I could defend, that I could uphold, that I could maintain, that I could move as and when I needed them. And I think for me, it's Tony Gaskin's quote that I come back to time and time and time again here. And his quote is, I think, you teach people how to treat you by what you stop, what you allow, and what you reinforce. And as a recovering people pleaser, I realized that I'd let people trample all over my boundaries, which then meant that I had little energy for what I really wanted or needed to do to fulfill my purpose. And so I had some big work to do on boundaries, and my team are extraordinary about nudging me and almost highlighting, there's a boundary, Joe, you're in danger of overstepping it yourself. So that's been fantastic for me.
Yeah, and I love how Brené Brown talks about the most impactful people that she's come across are always the people with the biggest boundaries and
Yeah.
that stick to them. Has there been any times with those boundaries, which I love that, by the way, that's a big part of what my realization has been as well, is that this self-love, self-compassion, and having boundaries are so important. Um, but in realizing that, how did you create them in the first place? And what's your secret, apart from your team, to sticking to those? I think this is something that's really, really hard.
In a way, I discovered the boundaries when I noticed that I wasn't feeling okay. So I almost discovered them by a process of not accident, really, but by a process of exploration. So it's not as though I sat back in a cold, darkened room and said, right, my boundaries are going to be this, this, and this. I just, when I came up against something and it's like, oh, that doesn't feel good. So what's the boundary here around that? And therefore, what do I need to do to A, be clear about where that boundary is and communicate it? Because people aren't mind readers. And one of the things that irritates me is when people get really upset about how a boundary is being, trampled on. But you didn't tell me there was a boundary there. Because it's not my boundary, it's your boundary. I don't necessarily know where it is. So I discover them through lived experience, really. And then it's about sharing those both with my team, but with people in general, so that if they're getting close, I let them know they're getting close and we can make some decisions about what to do instead. And so it's not a perfect answer. And of course, it's ongoing. It's not like, that's good, got my boundaries now, because they change. And the same boundary might be in a different place with different people. So if I'm working with someone who's an energy vampire, my boundaries are going to be a lot tighter than if I'm working with someone who is also an introvert, where we give each other space, or even an ally who knows how to give me space. There's more kind of flex in the boundary.
Yeah, I love that. And sometimes, as you said, it's not just about communicating those boundaries, but keep communicating till they get it. And they're like, oh, this is how we operate here. And you mentioned there's something which I think is really key for everyone, not just introverts, but this idea of feeling like you deserve to have those boundaries in. We get very used to giving, and it's a great thing to just keep giving to everybody, but there's a point where you can't give anymore, and it's much more powerful to focus on your own priorities first, and then you can give freely. You don't have to worry about it. So, yeah.
And there's that thing, isn't there, about selfish, and we throw that around. Oh, they're so selfish. Actually, if we go back to the oxygen mask on the plane concept, we need to look after ourselves in order to be able to serve other people. So selfish in that sense is not a bad thing. It's actually making sure that I'm replenished enough to be able to do what I need to do. And I'm also reminded of that other quote, and I don't know whose quote it is, but it's along the lines of, the people who object most to your boundaries, your new boundaries, are those who benefited most from you having none. And that's a really important thing for me as well. So when people start to get a bit uppy with me, usually it's a sign that they were taking advantage, or I was being too easy with them, people pleasing too much. So yeah, that's a good shout as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And my friend Linda, she always talks about it's not being selfish, it's being self-full. And I really love that.
Nice.
That's always a
Oh,
really nice reminder.
that's a lovely distinction, actually.
Mm. And I love that you feel your boundaries, which I think comes to what Emma-Louise was talking about earlier, that we have that ability to think but also feel deeply too. So when you are tuned into, oh, this feels like my boundaries being pushed, like what is that? How do I need to communicate this or reinforce something? Yeah, I can see how it will evolve and build and strengthen over time too.
And something along those lines is we have to remember that we all have different needs. One of the best things I did was I blocked off the first 90 minutes of my day. Does everybody I work with need to do that? No, they don't. Some people want to start chatting first thing, And just because my need is different than yours, it doesn't make it any less valid. It's like, what do you need? Here's what I need. We're talking about, here's how I'm going to be my best for you and for me. It's really explaining. It's like, here's why I need this.
Yeah. So would that be your tool that you're going to add to the toolbox? Have you got something?
I was thinking that, we've been talking a lot about strengths, and as I'm looking at the three of you, I know that you've all experienced wearing many hats. I'm pretty sure about that. And I have too. And, we don't have all the strengths. And I also know that, you've tapped into other people to help you with what you're doing. For example, I don't edit my podcast. I have a great editor, and I am not creative in that way. Um, Somebody makes all my social media assets because, mine wouldn't look as good. So, what are your strengths? I'm very analytical, I can definitely come up with the content for the podcast, but somebody else is an example, and there's many other examples. What is it that you do best? Do that and as much as you can. And sometimes if you're just starting out, we all know you have to do what you have to do. And sometimes you are doing things that aren't your skills, but work towards, getting somebody else to do those things where, you're not the strongest, use your strengths. That's probably my biggest thing.
Yeah, I love that. And Emma-Louise, what are you adding to the toolkit?
I'm going to add boundaries, but a different type of boundaries to Joanna's energetic people boundaries, and that is physical boundaries. I was in the second year of business when we went into lockdown. So I essentially built my business during COVID, where I was stuck at home. For 23 years, I'd gone out to a workplace and suddenly I was at home. And I found that the scope creep of the business was huge. I would be checking LinkedIn in the kitchen while I was making a cup of tea, or oh, I'll just take the laptop to the bedroom and just lay out on the bed for a bit. And I realized that the business had spilled out into my personal space. And obviously, I couldn't go and get an office or anything like that because we were in a lockdown. So that really made me think about these physical boundaries, which are completely self-imposed. But I now don't have any social media on my phone. I don't have anything related to my work on my phone. It's all on the laptop. The laptop does not leave this office unless there are extenuating circumstances, like I'm recording a podcast and there's an alarm going off in the background, then I'll move to another room. I don't work from bed. I don't work during certain times of the day and days of the week. And that might sound a little rigid to people. And it felt a little rigid to me at first because I had this, oh, I've got all this flexibility now. I'm an entrepreneur. But really, what was happening is there was no delineation, there was no off. And I felt like I was switched on all the time, which as an introvert isn't great. So have those physical boundaries. And like David says, everyone's different and they'll differ for some people. For him, it's having that 90 minutes blocked off at the start of the day. For some people, it might be working half days. It might be working 4 days a week, but it's understanding what works for you. And especially around your tech, because tech is insidious and it is a huge energy drain. Really knowing like, okay, these are the rules that I've written for myself because I want to operate in an energy first way. So I don't want to get to the end of the day, the end of the week, and be depleted because I didn't recharge at the start. I want to make sure whatever I'm heading into, I know that my energy is protected around that and that there's going to be an off at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that the ambitious introvert has removed anything work related from your phone. You'd almost expect it to be the opposite, that you're there taking your phone and your laptop everywhere, hustling left, right, and center. So I love that what you're putting into the toolkit is the complete opposite. But then you have, as we were saying, yourself full. You have that time and energy and focus for what really matters. And as David said, you can then really lean into those strengths and do what you do best. So yeah, I love that. What I was going to add kind of links into all of those, and it's permission to do it your way, to take time to discover what works best for you, to test new things, push your boundary, but then learn from that. Okay, this works, this doesn't, this is how I operate. Because I've so often come across people saying, oh, you should do this, and you've got these skills, you should be doing that. And I've learned to just see the would and could as a bit of a warning sign. Is that okay? But does that feel right for me? Does this work for my way of doing things? So that's what I would add, permission. So have loved this conversation, and I just love how we're all on the same page, but from different perspectives as well, which has been great. But is there anything you think that introverts need to know that we perhaps haven't touched on, or is there anything that we have touched on you think, okay, this is the big takeaway that people should have? I'm going to go in reverse order this time. Emma-Louise, how about for you?
So for me, I'd really invite people to strip away this stereotypical introversion, these different traits, because as we've said numerous times, it's all on a spectrum. We're all different. It's not just introverts as one personality type. Because what that does is straight away it takes away this excuse, because there's no, oh, I can't do that because I'm an introvert. The definition of introvert isn't, can't do video on LinkedIn or whatever the thing is. When we take that away and come back to what is our introversion and what is the common factor, it's our energy, like we've all been talking about. It's the way we use, drain, recharge our energy. And I think if we can strip away the personality traits, and actually any introvert just focuses on, right, where am I energized and where am I not spending enough time getting energized and what's draining me, then yeah, maybe you're a terrible public speaker and you'd like to become better at it. That's going to be a lot easier if you're energized. Maybe you are a shy introvert, and maybe that's something that you'd like to work on developing so you feel less shy in certain situations. Again, without that foundation of solid energy, it's really hard to make those big changes. So don't let yourself be pigeonholed into fluid personality traits that we can have an impact on. But first and foremost, protect your energy and make sure that is clean, because that's going to help you to be able to perform at your best.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And David, how about for you?
So I think in all of this, self-awareness is key. Get to know your strengths, but also we need everybody to know each other's strengths,
Mhm.
understand that extrovert in your life, have them understand you. And it's just a matter of, and we've been saying this, I can be a great leader, I can be a great public speaker, but my path to success may look different from my extroverted friend, and that's okay. And it's because of my gifts and my strengths. And, I need to not compare myself to others, but compare myself to how can I be my best. And so I think that's what it's all about, really getting to know your strengths, understanding what you need. I love public speaking. It used to terrify me. I can't even imagine doing this a few years ago, but I was looking forward to it. But I know that I just need to prepare in my introverted way. And as Emma-Louise was talking about, I need to think about, okay, after this, I need to block off some time so I can recharge if I need to. So managing my energy, but also the preparation is really key as an introvert for me.
Yeah, I think the preparation can help reduce that energy that we need, because I guess it reduces that novelty we were talking about earlier as well. Yeah. And I love that you highlighted there that we can do anything that experts can do if we want to, but it's just that path to success is different. And I joined Toastmasters when I realized I had to do more public speaking. This was 20 years ago now. And most people get up and they start talking and they get involved in the table topics, the impromptu speaking, which is just terrifying. But they do all that quite quickly. And I know it took me 6 months before I even tried anything out. But that was the time I needed to feel comfortable to give it a go. And then it all came together quite quickly. But I think, yeah, coming back to the permission, if that's the time you need, go for it. If you want to do anything but aren't quite sure yet or don't feel comfortable, find that path to success that will work for you. Yeah, brilliant one. Thank you. And Joanna.
I kind of want to build on what both of Emma-Louise and David have already talked about, because one of the things I'm really clear on is that not all weaknesses are equal. So some of them are allowable weaknesses. And yes, as a new business owner, you probably are doing all the things, some of which you'll be able to delegate out later on. But if my business doesn't rely on public speaking, don't give myself a hard time to think I have to get good at that now. That can come later on. And I think the other big thing for me, and it's something that Fifi Mason said recently, but I know it's not her term, it's not her concept, but I wish somebody had shown me how to fail fast earlier on in my business, because nothing is forever. And there's that cheesy old saying, isn't there, about you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. But actually, not only am I a recovering people pleaser, I'm a recovering perfectionist as well. And I was afraid to put stuff out there, to have my opinion be heard, even to get my face out there for a long time. And I just wished I'd learned how to fail faster, because everything's an experiment. When you're setting up in business, everything's an experiment. And we just need to remember to learn from each step. Very little is fatal. Some things you might be embarrassed about, but hell, isn't that life, actually? So treat it all as the experiment it is, and make sure you learn in every step, because in the whole flourishing journey, there are peaks and troughs. It's going to be like that throughout life. And the more we expand our comfort zones and work at our learning edge, the more those troughs, or the more we're going to feel those troughs. But that's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean we stop. If we've got that growth mindset, it means, aha, what do I do differently next time? It's just an experiment. Fail fast.
Yeah, I love that. And, I talk a lot about marketing, and I just think marketing is just one huge experiment, because we never know what's going to work. And then it starts working, and then suddenly it doesn't anymore.
Yeah.
But I was really fortunate to do my business degree at an art school. So we were encouraged to innovate, fail, mess up, get things wrong, tear things up, start again. And you were surrounded by people trying the same thing. The creativity is failing, because that's how you learn. And I'm so grateful for having that experience early on. And when I then went and worked in large corporate, I just saw people were so fearful of failing, whereas I was willing to have ideas and put myself out there and say, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm kind of thinking, this feels like it could be a good thing to try. And that got me loads of promotions and involved in interesting projects. And I think failure is more interesting than trying to get everything right, which, perfection, as we know, doesn't exist. So yeah, thank you for raising that. Brilliant. Thank you to all of you for sharing your time today and your energy. I really, really appreciate that. I think it's been eye-opening discussion for me anyway. Before we wrap up, I'd love it if you could just tell the audience where they can find you, so they can come out, check out your podcast, learn more about your work and your version of introversion and how you can support people. So let's go our traditional route around. Joanna, let's start with you.
On most of social media, you'll find me at Flourishing Introverts, and that's on so many different platforms, because I don't do it myself. If I had to do it myself, I wouldn't be on half of them. And the podcast is the Flourishing Introvert Talks, just remembering that we do have something to say for ourselves. So it dispels the myth that we have nothing to say.
Yes, brilliant. Thank you. David.
Yeah, quietandstrong.com will get you everywhere. It's my podcast of the same name, Quiet and Strong Podcast, and my social media is there. So quietandstrong.com has everything.
Wonderful. And Emma-Louise.
Same for me, very simple. theambitiousintrovert.com. The podcast is The Ambitious Introvert. And from the website, you can connect through to my LinkedIn and Instagram, which are the only two platforms that I'm using right now.
Yeah, I'm just on LinkedIn these days. I'm kind of everywhere, but yeah, that's my energy place. Brilliant. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope you have enjoyed this discussion in the Introverted Business Roundtable, and that it's helped you to see just how much power there is in your pre-existing quiet strengths. If you'd like to continue the conversation and connect with today's guests, Joanna, David, and Emma-Louise, you'll find all of those links in the show notes, which you'll find at melittacampbell.com/podcast. And if you'd like to discover how you can use your natural strengths to communicate your value clearly, start to market your small business in a way that feels aligned to your vision, your values, and your energy, and sell with calm confidence, then I would love for you to download the first chapter of my brand new book, Value Whispering, the smarter way to market your small business that just happens to be brilliant for introverts. And you'll be amongst the first to read it and to start discovering how to build a business that feels good and grows steadily. To get that chapter, just go to melittacampbell.com/chapter. Tell me where I can send it, and that will be arriving in your inbox straight away. Meantime, keep embracing your quiet power, and remember, you don't have to shout louder, you just need to resonate deeper. I'm Melitta Campbell, your business coach and value whisperer, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode next Wednesday. Bye.